Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Carla 2020, our exciting second day. Just to make sure we are broadcasting. Yes, on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm one of the moderators and program consultants, and we've got a very packed day for you. I hope you're all ready, have had your coffee, and are ready to change the world with everybody else at Carla. First of all, thank you, Johanna Koljonen, for a marvelous Nostradamus report presentation this morning. If you missed that, you can go back and catch it on YouTube. Johanna is always brilliant. Nostradamus is one of the most interesting pieces of work I read every year, and only she could be that brilliant this early in the morning. So thank you, Johanna, for kicking us off with that. A lot to think about. And today I'm introducing the first block. So you might have noticed that the rest of today's program is mostly organized into blocks of themed content. So this is block one. The 4 blocks today are basically about intersectionality, movements and activism, power and decolonialism, and also why we need a multitude of voices, a multitude of gazes, including from the queer and trans communities. So we're starting off with this block called It's Not You, It's the System, which we all know, it's not our fault. We're really going to delve into some intersectional perspectives. The aim is to dismantle, unpack, rethink, to look at the complexity of oppression in the current systems and start to fight those injustices. We have to understand them first. So as I've heard Amelia Roig say before, some of you might be saying intersectionality. I've heard the word, but I don't quite know what it means. She will say it best, but it's about tackling inequalities within inequalities and making marginalized groups and minorities visible within larger subgroups. So we've got some amazing speakers in this block. And of course, when you're talking about intersectionality, you really shouldn't do that without Amelia Roig, who is the founder and executive director of the Center for Intersectional Justice. She is based in Berlin. She has a keynote talk for us this morning. So I think with no further ado from me, we should listen to Amelia and what she has to say. I think, let's see, the title of her talk, Why Intersectionality is Not a Luxury. So over to you, Amelia.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be giving the keynote today for this very important event. I wish I could have been there, not in person because it's an online event, but at least live with you. Unfortunately, I had a family emergency, and so that's why I recorded the keynote before coming. And I hope to be available for a Q&A by phone. Yeah, let's try if it works, but at least I will send this. So first of all, I wanted to say how grateful I am that such a conference is taking place. And also, before I start with telling you what exactly intersectionality is about and why it's so relevant for the film industry, I want to start by saying that the film industry so far has played a very important role in maintaining hierarchies between people and in maintaining stereotypes. So it sounds like a negative thing to say, but it's the film industry and it's all the movies that we take on from a very early age that describe what beauty is, that describe what success is, that describe the models of life that are the desirable modes of life, that also set the tone basically for our societal norms. So with this comes a very high responsibility, and it's been done as well because, you know, the film industry has not been at all diverse as it should be. And it means that a single perspective has been projected onto us for very long now. And things are changing, I think, mostly with series and with opening up to the new generation as well. We see that there's a lot of programs that are breaking the rules and that are breaking the norms, films that are that wouldn't have been thinkable maybe 10 to 15 years ago. So that's very positive, because with the fact that the film industry so far has played such a tremendous role in propaging roles, hierarchies, and, as a way of consequence as well, oppression and discrimination. It has tremendous power because it can change this through films and through the cinema, through the film industry and through cinema and films and series and TV generally. It gives us the possibility to redefine norms, to redefine the societal norms in which we're embedded as people. And why is it important to have an intersectional approach to it? Simply because it can broaden the wide range of people that can be attained through the film industry. So I'm going to give you an example. So first of all, I'm going to give a quick definition of what intersectionality is. Intersectionality is at the same time a theory, a tool, an approach, a perspective, and a movement that can help make visible people who so far have disappeared in so-called single-axis movements and single-axis movements. So an example would be invisibilizing women wearing the headscarf, as an example, in the category women, or people with disabilities within the LGBTQI movement who also have been erased and disappeared in a sense, or invisibilized, which has created double exclusions for people who have multiple identities. So for people who are not the archetype of a group, for example, a white middle-class heterosexual woman would represent the archetype of what we understand as women. And when we have programs that are meant to increase the representation of women, then generally these are the types of women that are going to be at the forefront. And intersectionality helps us combat discrimination within discrimination, tackle inequalities within inequalities, and render minorities visible within minorities, and also not only rendering them visible, but also empowering them and protecting them. And so how does that work concretely? Well, we can see that as an example, if you would have quotas implemented for women in the film industry, for films, let's say, then what we would see with a lack of intersectional approach is that mostly white women of a middle-class background, heterosexual women would be featured in films, and the roles would also very likely also embrace the normative image that we have of society. So they would be mothers, or they would be spouses as well. They would most likely as well not be embracing, or at least representing, roles that are going against this representation of the typical woman, which is mainly patriarchal. And if we can apply an intersectional lens to it, or have an intersectional perspective, then we can make sure that the category women, in that sense, embraces the large diversity of people who also are in this category but tend to be erased. It means that we could have Black women, Muslim women, queer women, trans women. We could have women with disabilities, women from the global south, from the global north, from all over the place, and at least, and also very importantly as well, who play roles, or who tell stories that go against the dominant narrative of what a woman should be. And why is it important? It means that if we challenge stereotypes, and if we challenge the main narrative of what people need to be according to the matrix, that's what I like to call it, basically the story that has been told to us ever since we were born about what the world is about. And so if we want to disrupt the matrix, in a sense, and if we want to disrupt these norms, which are very narrow, they are narrow and they're negative for everybody. It means that even if men benefit from patriarchy, being caught in roles that are so rigid is something that prevents creativity, that prevents the expression of our entire being, and ultimately something that trumps the possibilities of the world has with the vast majority of people who are kept in roles that do not really fit what their souls are about. So this is why everybody could win from the dismantlement of all oppressions, including racism, patriarchy, and also their byproducts such as homophobia, ableism, and transphobia, and also classism. So in order to dismantle systems of oppression, it is important to adopt an intersectional lens because we can reach so much more than if we would use a single axis. Single axis being the opposite of an intersectional approach. So, for example, I want to give an example that the Combahee River Collective. The Combahee River Collective is a group of feminist Black lesbians in the United States who wrote a statement in 1997. And I think it was the birth of, the birth of intersectionality can be traced back to the 18th century with the abolition of slavery. And even after that, there has been as well like a lot of occurrences of trying to show the Black experience within feminism. So meaning that Black women have felt that they were erased from mainstream feminist discourses that were mainly dominated by white women. And so coming back to the quote of the Combahee River Collective, basically what they say is that if the liberation of Black women would mean the liberation of everyone, because it would presuppose that liberating Black women would mean that we liberate themselves, we liberate them, or at least we dismantle patriarchy and racism and capitalist oppression and classism in a sense for them. So said differently, if we manage to tackle or at least make sure that the people who are the most marginalized in society, if we make sure that their rights are respected, that they have access to political, economic, and cultural power, if we can ensure that they are not stereotyped and that they have the privilege of individuality, meaning that they can represent who they are without having to be associated with stereotypes that are mostly, of course, negative and oppressive, then we can make sure that we reach everyone. And that's, I think, my favorite quote by Kimberly Crenshaw, who said, a truly intersectional feminism is a feminism which can reach everyone on the planet. It means that, and I, again, use this hyperbole, that if we have a disabled, Black, Muslim, trans woman, for example, and if we can make sure that this person feels safe, empowered, and free in our society, then we can be sure that it will be the case for all people with disabilities, for all women, for all LGBTQI people, for all poor people, for all people who she is a representative of. And so instead of tackling just one angle, be it gender or patriarchy, then we can make sure that we dismantle oppressions in their entirety. And this is ultimately what intersectionality is about. And if we can apply an intersectional lens, an intersectional perspective to the film industry, be it in the representation, in roles, in films, and in narratives, in stories that are told, but also in power, meaning who has the money, who decides what films get produced, who has the last word, basically, who has the power in the film industry. If we can make sure that we apply an intersectional lens to it, then it could look very differently from now on. And I know that all of you who are here are interested in making the film industry a fairer industry, to make sure that voices are heard, to make sure that power is redistributed, and that it's not a monopoly in the hands of a few people who continue to impose their vision of the world onto the rest of us. So that's very powerful. And I really hope that you have a very successful conference. And I hope as well that I can be wired in as well for the Q&A, even though it depends on technical issues. And but if not, then I wish you a very fruitful rest of the conference, and I was very honored to be here today. Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, that's why she is the world leading expert on intersectionality. Just amazing thoughts from Amelia Roig there. Thank you so much to Amelia for taking the time to be part of Carla 2020. As she warned, unfortunately, a Q&A is not possible right now. Very sorry about that. Anybody hoping to get a question into her. But what a lot to unpick from what she just said. And, you know, the way she speaks about it, it's almost like there's hope. We can do this. This is a thing that can happen. We get away from the single axis. So I do hope that that is our future. And thank you so much to Amelia. Once again, you can check out her work at the Center for Intersectional Justice. But now I'm going to welcome, because we don't have that Q&A with Amelia, I'm going to welcome back Johanna Koljonen and Victoria Thomas, who are my fellow moderators and amazing women. And they're going to offer some reflections on what they just heard from Amelia, which, you know, is not an easy thing to do, to watch something that powerful and then immediately reflect on it. So, ladies, I'm in awe of you for doing this. And I'm going to go behind the scenes and let you have a quick discussion. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Over to Johanna.
Thank you very much. Let's see if we could also get Victoria on. Hey, hi, Victoria.
I'm here.
Wow,
Hi.
yeah, that was amazing. I guess I'll just put you on the spot and I'll just let you start. What thoughts, what are you thinking after hearing Victoria?
It was very interesting. You know, I love it when I hear people articulate something that we have been going through for a while, because she wasn't really saying anything that I don't experience or understand. I'm also very happy that there's now a name for it, because I know probably 10 years ago, I found myself in spaces that were predominantly women in film. And I did sort of feel as though it was not quite a place for me as a Black woman, because the definition of woman was actually assumed to be white in most cases. And I don't think people were even being deliberate about that. It was just, you know, their own unconscious bias. So I love the fact that she articulated it as well, because I don't think it's something a lot of us are really aware of.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of hooks into that, which is that there is this idea from like, there's this phrase that's been, you know, existing probably for over a century, I think, in like left-wing politics, which is no one is free until everyone is free.
Yeah.
And I have like, you know, I grew up with a lot of, you know, white dude activist friends who would often say this and genuinely mean it. And I think that this is like an ideological reality in progressive movements that doesn't always translate to practical reality. And in part it is because of just like a lot of those spaces haven't actually been diverse. And also because a lot of like, you know, intellectuals and artists, it's also a financial privilege to be able to make those life choices. So there are also structural reasons why a lot of those conversations, like generation by generation, each new group that is achieves freedom can you know, will also, you know, move farther away from oppression and therefore like over the generations lose touch with some of that. But it is very striking to me that there's always some goddamn excuse. I'm sorry about cursing, but like there's always, no one is free until everyone is free. Except when we say everyone, we don't quite mean everyone. We mean like, you know, us and then like one more group or two more groups. And then there's something, okay, but we can't. Yeah, if we have to take all of these things into account, then it's not gonna, then we're never gonna be done. And I guess that's my big thought right now. It's like, yeah, well, we're never gonna be done probably. Because, you know, society changes, class structures changes, new groups become oppressed in new ways, and then everybody, you know, we still need to be liberated. I don't know. I guess this is just like no, I'm just rambling, literally. I don't know. What are you? Is anything of this that I'm saying resonating with you?
No, yeah, what you're saying does resonate, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to face in terms of altering these power structures is that no one wants to feel like they're me. So nobody's really going to put their hand up and sort of say, we're part of the problem, please come in and fix us. Everybody would prefer to think that everybody else is the problem. And, you know, when it comes to white women, for example, you know, I always say this as a joke, like if you look at historical archives, you know, photographs and videos of periods like the Holocaust or the civil rights movement in America, and you see Jewish people, you know, being harassed in the streets, or Black people in America being beaten up, or kids going to school, you know, when they were desegregating the schools, and you saw people out there screaming at them and cussing them out. It wasn't just white men, you know, there were white women in those photographs as well. So white men quite unfairly tend to get the stick for racism, but they were not the only racists in the world at the time. And of course, because of the oppression of women as well, it also means that white women have also had their battles to fight alongside women of all other races. And so I think when we're talking about changing these power structures, a lot of focus is placed on white men, probably because like they were the most privileged. But again, within the marginalized groups, we also have our own prejudices of others. Similarly, within Black communities or a lot of minority communities, I don't know that we always treat people who are gay and lesbian, for example, as equals, because if you take a lot of African nations, homosexuality is still illegal. So I think we have to probably take a wider view when we're talking about equality. I don't know that the right approach is to tear it, because then whose freedom becomes more important and gets a priority. You know, I listened to, there is a comedy special on Netflix by a comedian called Michael Shea, who is on Saturday Night Live. And I think for me, he was the person that articulated this equality struggle the best. And he said that all everybody is saying is that everybody in the world, anywhere, should have equal access to everything else. And there's some people who are sort of thinking about that and sort of going, no, because that's really it.
But I mean, the reason they're going like, no, is that is not currently like within the system that we are currently part of. Yeah, that isn't impossible. That is not how our resources are divided. So when you get serious about intersectionality, you come to a point where you're like, okay, but like certainly this type of capitalism, I would maybe go so far as to say that like capitalist system in general, probably not entirely, you know, maybe we are not able to achieve justice for all and equality for all when the resources are so unevenly divided. And now, of course, also we have all kinds of climate change related reasons to sort that out very rapidly. And but I mean, and that's a terrifying thought to people, and that's also that's a terrifying thought to people all over like a financial scale, thinking about their lives, thinking of, I don't want to be in some kind of revolution. I don't want to be in some kind of revolution, you know, that threatens my job if I can only just pay the rent and I have to feed these children. So it's also systemic change is terrifying. And that's why you kind of can't separate this from progressive politics. And that is also why it's so dangerous when progressive politics becomes dominated by people with a lot of economic privilege or other kinds of privileges as well. I'd like to, you know, I realize we're running out of time fast, but like I'd like to think about this from the form of a storytelling perspective, because I think Emilia is very astute and correct in saying that we do perpetuate archetypes. Archetypes are a necessary, or not necessary, but a convenient storytelling shortcut.
Yes.
And archetypes, like, I mean, other qualities are attached to archetypes. So when we say hero, you know, suddenly maybe we think about a man and a white man. And the hero archetype will work just as well, even with those surface qualities, like disconnected from it. So I think another question for me is like for artists who become very stressed and say, yeah, but I can't observe every intersection in my story. My story cannot be about everything. Like that is true. But the question is, what are the shortcuts? Like maybe you have a focus and you have a protagonist, and that protagonist has some friends and some foes and so on. Who are they? But then there's the world, and those people have desires, and there are people in the background, and those people have attributes and qualities and jobs. And that, I think, is also where this intersectional approach can be like applied. That we have to think about, like, am I unthinkingly repeating my stereotypes about like what would people who hang out at a square look like? What does an unemployed person look like? What does a cleaner look like? And then when I look at it, you know, if I question it, it's maybe I am just repeating what other films are saying, not what reality is like at all.
Yeah, but I think, you know, as a writer, I will always fight for the freedom for writers to tell the stories that they want to tell. And I don't think we sort of have to have this tick boxing approach of trying to represent for everybody, because I don't think we can. You know, we have to reflect definitely the worlds that we want to reflect. I think the reason why it becomes an issue is because not many people get to tell stories. I think if you have a diverse group of people telling stories, quite naturally, intersectionality is going to happen, because we're going to see different points of views, different worlds. You know, just this notion that there are some people who are telling the stories and they have a duty to sort of let the rest of us in to color their stories, I think that itself is slightly problematic. I think the reality is good storytellers, regardless of who they are or where they're from, should be given the opportunity to have their voices heard. And I think once we do that, we'll never really worry about archetypes and stereotypes. You know, the reason why white men don't complain about archetypes and stereotypes of white men is because there are just so many diverse portrayals of white men, you know, but for everybody else, we sort of have to rely on the odd, you know, commission here and there, the odd film. And therefore we're all looking at those characters for a reflection of who we are, especially as some of us get judged by what people see in the media, because that's the only interaction that they have with us. So I don't think that it's asking too much to just give every voice an equal opportunity to be heard. And I think if we do that, we don't have to talk about intersectionality, because we'll see a very diverse world quite naturally.
It is not too much to ask, I think, to let every voice have that opportunity. We're out of time. Hi, Wendy. We will, what we're going to do is I'm going to step out and let you guys continue.
Thank you so much. I don't know how you can be so smart, off the cuff, having just heard that. Well, as Victoria said, she's been thinking about this stuff for decades, but that was a really great reflection. And thank you both for that. I've learned from Amelia, I've learned from you. And yeah, I love this idea, Victoria. We don't have to worry about intersectionality if everybody just gets to tell their story.
Yeah.
Give everybody the resources. So we're going from maybe quite a heavy topic to having a laugh. Don't we all need a laugh now and again? It's Saturday morning, but it's a comedy with a message. We are going to have a screening of the web series Friday Night Bites. And don't worry if you're thinking, oh my God, I don't have time to watch a film. It's 8 minutes long. So everybody has 8 minutes to see these amazing women. And yeah, I just to point out that if you've been looking at all the Carla promotion activity, you might have seen this photo of these amazing women in their waistcoats and their bright lipstick holding crowbars. And they look so badass. Well, that is these women. So you're going to want to see what they create. So this is Friday Night Bites, and then we're going to, after you watch the video, we're going to welcome you back, and they're going to be in conversation with Victoria. So let's start the screening. Oh, I should mention they're from New Zealand. Here we go.
It's been bugging me.
What?
Like, what do you call white people when you want to racially offend them?
Guaylo? Whitey?
Cracker ass cracker?
Nah. One time this guy told me he didn't mind being called a cracker because he'd rather be the whipped cracker than the whipped. Typical white response.
Okay.
Why don't we hang out anymore? Like for us, it's chink, ching chong, gook. For you, I don't know. Coconut?
I'm not PI.
Hori then?
I'm not Maori either.
Ebo, walk.
Whoa!
Curry muncher?
Guys!
Towelhead.
Guys! You know I'm white, eh? I'm white.
You're not.
I can assure you that I am white.
Where are you from?
Palmerston North?
No, where are your parents from?
Yeah, Palmerston North.
See a picture of your parents.
I'm feeling a little weird about this line of questioning.
Pecs, it didn't happen. Yeah. You're adopted.
No!
Your mother had an affair.
You're being a little offensive right now.
But you signed a petition against Yellowface.
Yeah, and you defended me against that fuckboy on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, being white doesn't preclude me from being a nice person.
Well, you're not just a nice person, you're also
You're
like...
brown passing.
Yeah, you're basically an awesome brown dude.
Yeah, why else would we hang out with you?
Yeah, well, I'm flattered that you think I'm good enough to be brown, but the fact is that I'm not.
You don't want to be brown?
No, it's not about what I want, it's about what I am, which is white. And, you know, I could never assume to know what it would be like to be a brown person, so...
So you've never been called racist things?
No.
You've never been randomly pulled over by a cop?
No.
You've never been followed around by a security guard in a shop?
Yeah, there was like one time that...
I knew it. He's brown passing.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Why does it matter? Stop, Jack. Stop.
Why are you getting so worked up?
It's a compliment.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
I just feel weird right now.
Why?
Well, I kind of feel like this is reverse racism.
Reverse racism is a non-word.
Yeah, racism is a system in history built upon privilege and oppression.
Yeah, and you can't reverse that.
Yes, but oppression, isn't that what you're doing to me right now?
Calling you out on a non-word is not oppression, dude.
Yeah, but aren't you being bigoted towards me?
Oh, maybe he is white.
But you say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, but like, isn't it though?
No, I'm still your woke babe.
Oh, honey, don't call yourself that.
Yeah.
Look, I'm still the same pal you complain about not seeing enough. I'm still the same person you invited around for platonic snuggles and snacks. I'm still your friend. I'm still Arlo. Like, whether I'm white or not. Oh, God, so...
Not such an early start to
But it's the weekend.
It was nice seeing you again. We might do this
Seriously?
again.
Okay, but my box wine.
Love you.
Okay.
See you, babe.
But my organic popcorn.
It's not fun hanging out with you.
Look, do we need to talk about this some more? Because I feel like there's some unresolved animosity here. Like,
See you next
How
weekend.
is
We're
good
talking
and
bye. Bye.
really? Are you sure? This is weird.
Man, that sucks. I like really liked him.
Did you see him try to take his snacks back?
So white. Can't believe we didn't see it before.
New to it, but the do it, get it right. Proof pull up to whoever say you get
Man,
it
I miss
right.
this.
Root change
Great
from our
popcorn.
move lane, I go
You did bring
right.
good snacks.
Who do I do me for you? Who even knew who were you? Suit yourself, psych. Psych, I'll get it right.
Do you like legs or breast?
Thank you, Bird on a Wire, for providing us free-range chicken and delicious salads. It made us feel very yummy in our tummy. Check out the menu link below.
Well, that was great. Yeah, subscribe, eat their chicken so you can support them. Yeah, I love the white guy getting taken down. Fantastic. So we're delighted all the way from New Zealand. I have no idea what time it is there. Very late at night. We have the Flat 3 Collective, let's say. We have Ali Yu. We have Perlina Lau, JJ Fong, Roseanne Liang, and Carrie Warkia. And as I said, they're all joining us from New Zealand. Victoria Thomas is going to take over chatting with them. And yeah, I can't wait to hear more about what they do, because if that's any indication, we need more of that in our lives. So over to Victoria, if she's here. Yes, Pretty in Pink. Over to you, Victoria.
Good morning to everybody, I guess, in Europe, and to everybody joining us from New Zealand. Good evening. How are you guys doing? I'll just wait for all the cameras to come on. I think we have Perlina as well. Great.
Hi.
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 Hi, welcome to Carla 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. That was really great. I really loved that episode. And I remember when I came across your work, I was very surprised that I had not heard about it before, and now I'm completely hooked. But before we sort of start talking about it, I think it'd be a good idea for us to do some introductions of who you are as individuals, and then we'll also talk a bit about who Flat 3 is. So we'll start with, I guess, Paulina.
Hi, so I'm Paulina, as you just said, from New Zealand, Chinese, Kiwi, usually work in news and broadcast, but we started Flat 3 Productions about 7 or 8 years ago now. We've all sort of grown up doing acting, so we met at a theatre show and came together and formed that company. But so I've been dabbling between those two things ever since.
Okay, thank you. And Kerry?
Kia ora koutou. My name's Kerry Warakia. I'm a producer also in New Zealand. And I was lucky enough to be invited by the Flat 3 team to be, I guess, an honorary Flat 3 member and work with them and produce some of their work. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
And Roseanne?
Kia ora, I'm the director and co-writer of Friday Night Bites. I'm Chinese New Zealand. I was born here, of Hong Kong stock. Yeah.
Okay. And last but not least, Ali.
Kia ora, my name's Ali. I'm from Christchurch originally, but I came to New Zealand when I was 8 from China. And apart from acting, getting into writing, but my day job is actually an optometrist.
Okay, so who are Flat 3? I love your tagline that you're dreamers and doers. So what's the dream?
The dream is not to be the only. When these 3 ladies came to me and decided that they wanted to, the story is that they were 3 actors who met in a theatre show and were sick of the thin auditions that they were being offered as actors, and came to me to write something that they could have some control over, because we all know that actors have very little control over the roles that they're offered and the roles that they audition for. And I think that they said to me, we've never seen a comedy featuring Kiwi Asian women or Asian women, so let's write one. And the dream is not to be the only ones. The dream is to have a myriad of these things, so that we have as much to choose from as there is Caucasian choices, I guess.
Yeah, I think for us the dream was simple: to be on screen together and not say we're sisters. You know?
But yeah, because everything at the time that we were seeing, and this was probably about 7, 8 years ago, all the theatre or TV shows that were being made, if you ever did see an Asian or a Chinese person on screen, they were either talking about being Chinese, or their characters had just arrived in New Zealand, so they would have had an accent. So we just didn't see ourselves on screen just being 20-something-year-old Kiwi Asians, trying to hold down a job and keep your flatmates happy, that sort of thing. So that's where we thought, why don't we make something that has that and add it to the mix?
And I guess that's enough probably taps in quite well with what we're talking about today, which is about power structures and who get to tell our stories, because I can definitely relate to that as somebody of African descent living in the UK. Again, I rarely get to see just Black British women just being British women having the same exact problems like everybody else. So it was quite refreshing to watch your series and sort of see that perspective. Why did you choose to do it as a web series?
Firstly, it's a budget thing. Yeah, and also being on the internet, you're less censored. You can talk from the heart and you get immediate response from your audience, what's working, what's not working. I think that's really gratifying.
Yeah, I think also, Ali, why a web series is also because certain doors were shut, when these three actresses went to Roseanne and said, you know, we'd like to, Roseanne at the time was the only Asian Kiwi woman who had written a feature film, 2 feature films, I think by that stage maybe. And, you know, that's like Roseanne says, that's a pretty terrible predicament, like to have that statistic in New Zealand. And I think that these 4 women, just the act of writing their own content, making their own content, and not apologizing for what was in that content, but also making it very real to who they were in their lives here in New Zealand was an act of activism in itself, to say, actually, we're just going to put ourselves on screen and just be real. And I think that, you know, just kind of tell the stories we want to tell from our voices. And I think that was a massive, you know, they really sort of broke the mold. And that was massive at the time. And then to go on to that, you know, now they're making a series for television, which is amazing. And more people of Asian, you know, Kiwi descent in New Zealand are coming through making those things, and these women have led the way. You know, that's pretty great, and the doors are opening. They're opening the doors.
And also, just to add that point, Kiri actually did produce the first web series in New Zealand, Auckland Days, and we took inspiration from that. So our marketing ploy is we're the second web series of New Zealand.
But it kind of came full circle for me, because I was already sort of fangirling about Roseanne way before I even made that one. So it was great.
That's good. And I guess that's what I was sort of trying to touch on without making any assumptions about what the media landscape was like in New Zealand. Because one of the comments that I've heard from people who work in the world of web series is that in web series, diversity is not a problem. There's just so much diversity of voices and stories being told because the curators and the gatekeepers are not there. And I guess for me, that's one of the things I've always sort of talked about when we talk about marginalization or people not seeing themselves represented, that it's about the willingness of the powers that be to actually allow these voices. So how did you find that transition from web series to a TV show? Did you feel that you lost any creative freedom, or do you think that you were able to just be your true selves?
I feel like, you know, it is really great that you know, back when we were starting to make web series, we were inspired by shows like Broad City and Awkward Black Girl, and so that's really great. But when you look at the budgets of what those shows had, what our show had certainly was a fraction. Minute for minute, we were getting something like, you know, less than half of what minute for minute broadcast television was getting. So unfortunately, more money, more problems, right? And so we have to answer to more people who are more risk averse and are more afraid of risk taking. And I'm not saying that the current TV show that we're working on now, we've been lucky to have the support of a really great, you know, public broadcaster and public funding. But the road to there has been, it's been hard to be able to prove ourselves. We had to do, you know, 5 seasons of our web series of the Flat 3 world to be able to be trusted with this budget. And we'll have to do well with this TV series, which is low budget TV, to be trusted with a proper TV budget in the future.
Yeah, and that's one of the comments that we hear all the time, that as minorities, we don't get the opportunity to be mediocre. We have to be excellent to be given access to the exact same thing, because if something does not work or is not perfect immediately, we're told that that's proof that it doesn't work. So are you feeling any pressure right now going into this season?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? The topic, I was just going to say, I think the topic says it all. It's not you, it's the system.
Yeah. But how are you handling that pressure? How are you handling sort of the new dynamics? And do you feel like you really have to prove yourself? Because it's that thing where we always have to work harder than everybody else. And everything just always has to be perfect and really deliver over and above average for us to get access to the same opportunities. So what are you thinking going to this now? How do you think you would react if you don't sort of, I guess, meet the expectations that they have set for you, even though you might be doing incredibly well?
I think the pressure was always inevitable. We knew that going in and taking, applying for the funding and then getting the funding. But I think also, and I thought about this recently and I spoke about it with Ali, if they turn around and say, oh, it's not perfect and it's a failure, well, the other people who've been making TV shows in New Zealand have had decades to get it wrong and then get it right. So in some ways it's an impossible, it's impossible to be perfect or to be amazing. And in one, not even a year to match up to 30, 40 years of television making. So I think, not that I resent that idea, but it is very unfair, and you need to be given time, to improve and to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous burden. And I would also say, Perlina, that there are lots of those production companies still getting it wrong.
Yes.
So
That's the thing, and we see it all over the world. I'm pretty sure there are lots of African Americans who would say the same thing, and minorities in so many other places. But how has it been received by the Asian community in New Zealand? Because again, at times when we don't get to see so many representations of ourselves, when there is one, everybody has an expectation about how they should be presented. So what has been the, I guess, the feedback from your communities?
I'm very interested to how it's going to be received by our community when our show comes out. Just because we're not a monolith, and it's been a lot of support from our community, but of course, privately, people will talk to us and be like, hey, I disagreed with you on this point that you made on that episode. And that's totally cool. I love having discussions like that. And I think we should be open and honest about those discussions.
And would rather be having those discussions than not. The fact that we can make content and people are happy to talk about it or even open to sharing their feedback with us, that's what we want, and it's great. But yeah, the show's not due out to hopefully sometime next year, so we'll have to wait and see.
I would also
I wanted to give an sorry.
You go, Ro.
I wanted to just give a short example from Flat 3, was that actually we find that the Asian community makes us better in a way, where they hold us to task. There was one situation where, the first series of Flat 3 we made literally on no money. Like we put in our own money to the tune of $1,000 to make an entire series. And so we got a lot of favors from our friends and actors who happened to be white. And so a lot of our love interests were white people. And when we showed this to the Asian community, they asked us questions. They said, why are all the love interests white? And we said, well, that's not our fault. We were just doing it on the cheap. We didn't have enough money. We just had Caucasian friends who did it for free. And then we started realizing, actually, we bear a different responsibility. If we really care about representation, then we will work that much harder. It was laziness on our part, and not malicious laziness. We just hadn't thought about it. And then we went through the process of making sure that our love interests and, our other characters were diverse. And it's funny that we had to be held to task by our own community, which is, I think, a really valuable thing.
But I think at times when you're just sort of trying to get stuff off the ground as filmmakers, you're just grateful for any help and support that you can get. And you already feel when you're doing it as minorities, as though you're even breaking the mold. So I don't think you ever think that you would fall into that trap of potentially perpetuating the same stereotypes that the majorities do. And I think that's always like an interesting thing when we have to hold ourselves accountable. So how are you guys holding yourself accountable now that things are changing for you?
Victoria, before we move on to that, I just wanted to go back and say there's another element to this, which is also building audiences, building new audiences, because when you start out for something like this, like something like Flat 3, audiences had never seen that before. Like we hadn't seen, Kiwi Asian women who were New Zealanders, born in New Zealand, making these shows. This is you are there is an element of kind of bringing an audience along, showing them, and also I would say for a community to see themselves on screen and go, oh, okay, this is new for me. There is an element of that. And so I think that that has to come into it too, when we're sort of moving along, you know, telling these stories. There is, while it might seem like, oh, well, nobody watches, it's like, yeah, but we're teaching, we're building new audiences. And the system has been geared to only one audience for the entire, you know, in its entirety since time immemorial. Like, so that is also something to overcome. It's another challenge, I think.
Yeah, because I guess at times as well, people probably don't tune into these channels because they don't expect to see themselves reflected. I know that there are lots of British channels that I don't really watch. I probably watch more American TV, even though I live in the UK. So I guess also earlier on today, we were talking about intersectionality. So has your revolution in a lot of ways sparked more demands in New Zealand from other minority groups about seeing themselves reflected in the media and entertainment in New Zealand?
Could you possibly repeat that question?
No. Obviously, you guys are sort of Asian in New Zealand, and you're putting forward your own narratives. But are you sort of getting any pressure from other minority groups who perhaps don't see themselves in New Zealand television, thinking we also should be included? Why are we not here? Do you feel any obligation to represent for other minorities, or have you sort of inspired other people to also come forward with their own narratives and push to get it made?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a growing number of different, like just a couple of years ago, I saw very few South Asian stories or South Asian creatives being in the forefront, and that's really blossomed in the last couple of years. So in this time with our television show, I think when we were casting, we were especially conscious of being representative of the New Zealand demographic as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's always that responsibility to represent for everybody, which I don't think we can ever achieve. Mm-hmm. So we're running out of time and we only have 5 minutes left. I'd love to just ask all of you, what's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew before you started? And I'll get everybody to say something. So I'll probably start off with Roseanne.
Oh my God. What's something that I know now that I wish I, that most people are faking it till they make it. Yeah. And that confidence get. I know this is so cliche, but it's that, and I kind of hate also reducing things to a pithy thing, but you know how they're like, I wish I could walk into a room with the confidence of a mediocre white man. Yeah. You know, like we bear the burden of responsibility as women of color. We want to do the right thing. We want to be excellent, but we also want to be incredibly sensitive to everyone. And this is where intersectionality comes in. We want to pay it forward, right? But that burden of responsibility can also really stifle us. And so when we walk into a room and we start, you know, thinking about all these things and putting all our pressures on ourselves, would a more confident Caucasian person do the same when they walk into a room? And does it make us look like we don't know, like we have doubt, we have self-doubt? And that can be a real problem. So it's about reading the room. It's about not being overconfident to the point of hubris, but or arrogance, but also being able to back ourselves and being like, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. If you want me to tell the story, which I think people are telling us that they do, and not just us, others like us, we want to be part of myriad stories coming forward. We don't just want it to be us. Then we know our shit, you know. We know our shit.
And you're doing it. So Perlina, what's the one thing that you wish you knew?
It's a little bit similar to Roseanne, but yeah, when we first started doing the web series, we sort of were trying to actually get away from the race chat, I suppose, you know, by depicting ourselves as normal sort of Kiwis, but actually in doing that, we stepped back and allowed people to step in and actually comment on the race stuff. And I suppose, you know, it's only been in the last few years, maybe at the most 4 or 5 years, that diversity has become a real thing for even Hollywood. And now you can see it ripple effect around the world where people have to consciously, you know, and be more inclusive. So in some ways, if I could have seen 4 or 5 years into the future and knew that everyone was going to be talking about it, I think maybe, I don't know, we would have had more confidence to back ourselves and gone with a bit more gusto, I suppose.
Okay, and Ali, what about you?
Ask for more. Don't be afraid to ask for more. I think a lot of us are like, yes, we'll take the crumbs because this is the only chance we'll get, but you don't know until you ask.
Yeah, well, my mom always says the only thing that people can do when you ask for more is say no, you know, or
exactly.
you want. Yeah. Nobody's going to kill you for asking. So last but not least, Carrie, what about you? What's the one thing that you wish you knew before?
I think it touches on what we were just talking about earlier, which is, and I think Roseanne, you were sort of referring to it as well in terms of the community holding you to task. And I think what I feel like I've grown to know more now than I did before is about that consciousness, bringing things to your consciousness. You know, like who's missing from the table? Why are they missing from the table? How do I bring them to the table? Just having those things in your conscious thought means that you can do better next time and with every show, and it might just be a little step forward, a little bit better, but it's better. I think that's what I've learned along the way.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. It was really amazing talking to you, and good luck with the TV show.
Thank you.
It's the first of many. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Kia ora.
All right, then, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Victoria. Great conversation. And thank you, everybody joining us from New Zealand. That was really fascinating to hear what you've been able to achieve, and we look forward to more. And just to mention, if anybody is curious about more content from the Flat 3 gang, they have a YouTube channel where there's got 140 videos. Yep. So that'll keep you busy for the rest of the day. Not today, because you're watching Parla, but another day you can watch some of that. But yeah, really interesting what they've been achieving in New Zealand. And because this is a global conference, now we're going straight over to India. Amazing. The magic of technology. I'm really excited that we have the team behind Margarita with a Straw here for us. This is a feature film that features I'm going to spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. It's an Indian woman with a disability who turns out to be gay or is exploring her sexuality. So perfect to talk about. And it's also been a big hit internationally. And I think that's important to talk about too. Audiences are not scared of this stuff. So I'm really glad we have the director Shonali Bose here with us. We've got all three right here. We have her cousin, if I'm correct, who is activist Malini Chib. And we have the actress Kalki Koechlin. And we're going to talk about the film, some of the themes, some of the responses to the film. And just to mention with this one, I'm very glad to say we're going to be taking some audience questions. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, just type in a question in the YouTube comments, and my colleague Regina is going to then bring the questions over here and we'll ask them. Great stuff. So thank you so much for joining us on your Saturday. It's great to be beaming in from around the world. Shonali, I'd like to start with you and just how this film idea grew within you and why it was a story you were passionate to tell. And I think that might have something to do with Malini as well.
Thank you so much, Wendy. It's wonderful to be on this conference. I've been hearing it from the start and learning a lot myself. So really kicked to be on this. The seed of this is, of course, my sister Malini, who I grew up with. She's just a year younger than me. So it's really a film that's perhaps without me, before even becoming a filmmaker, been brewing within me. But the very direct seed happened some years before I started writing it. We were in London. Malini was studying, doing her second MA at London University. I was on my way back to India from the US where I lived. And we met at a pub. Malini outdrinks me. Malini is a big drinker. And this is one of the myths actually about the disabled. When we were younger and we would go out, to drink, you know, I would have to give her sippy cup to the waiter. And the thing is that for a disabled person, you don't actually have sophisticated cups. You still have very infantilized, you know, childlike looking sippy cups with the straw. And I'd give that to the waiter and say, fill this with a whiskey soda and, you know, lemonade for me. And they would always just look at me with horror. But anyway, so here we're in a London pub. As usual, Malini's out drinking me. And I said, Malini, you're about to turn 40. What would you like for your 40th birthday? It's the best birthday ever. And she said, I just want to have sex. And that came out loud and clear, and the whole pub heard that. And in that moment, I must tell you that I was quite taken aback. And I realized that for the longest time, I hadn't thought about my sister's sexuality. I had very much when we were teenagers, because she was way more romantic than me. And, you know, I was conscious that, you know, I didn't want to date in case, you know, she wouldn't be able to date. But at this age, I had stopped thinking about it, and it really brought that home strongly. So when I started thinking about my next film, I wanted to tackle this thing. And we are talking a lot about visibilization. And I really felt that, you know, so the disabled in India are completely invisibilized. The big battle for them is more things like social alienation and discrimination, access is a big thing, you know, but I didn't want to deal with those obvious things that when you're a disabled person, then that's the obvious thing that, you know, do you have access to go to a place? Are people looking into your eyes and speaking with you? I wanted the character to be a really complex character. Like for me, growing up with Malini, I know her ins and outs. I know her as a complex being. I don't see her as a person in a wheelchair, but society sees her as a person in a wheelchair. So for me, the challenge and my passion in making this film was that the audience should cease to see Laila, my protagonist, as a disabled person. They need to get past that hurdle and see her just as a regular teenager. And so I wanted her to be just a teenager, and therefore I made the character sort of gray, who has jealousies and love and her own needs and desires and exploring her sexuality. So I deliberately decided that I'm not going to explore the typical issues that, say, as an activist, we might be fighting for in the country. So that's really sort of what I feel strongly about and wanted to do with Margarita with a Straw.
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm on mute?
Oh, it's always somebody. I'm muted, sorry. Somebody always does it, and it's usually me. But I think it does come across that this is not, I mean, the film might have an activist result, but it's not about a campaign. It's about a woman. And I think that's one reason why audiences were so engaged with this film. We should mention it's on Netflix in a lot of the world right now. People got a link to be able to watch it as part of Carla. So if you haven't watched it yet, please watch it tonight or something, or on Netflix later. Because it's a real sort of crowd pleaser. You're just in awe. You connect with this woman and her life. And yeah, it's not about, is there a ramp for her to go here or there? It's her and her life, her emotional life. So Malini, I would like to come to you next. You have told your own story in your autobiography called One Little Finger. So when Shonali was mentioning that she was going to do this film, were you excited by the prospect, or were you at all concerned about how she might portray this character?
I was very excited, but Margarita with a Straw is not based on One Little Finger. One Little Finger is about my early life.
Okay.
Shonali shared every draft with me. I was excited about the making of this film. I have written many articles on the female body, called it the rejected body. particularly a disabled woman's body. In the light of society's obsession with the body beautiful. I was really excited and happy about this film. I cried every time I watched it, which is many times. I laughed. I enjoyed it immensely. It was not maudlin. Importantly, I met a wonderful person called Kalki, and we became friends. We were all like-minded people in making this film. Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. And Shonali, I'm going to come to Kalki next, but did you ever try to cast a disabled actress in the role, or was that just not possible? Or can you talk about your choice of casting?
I definitely tried to cast and spent about 6 months because of my family's work. Malini's mother, my aunt, is the founder of the very first institution with children with cerebral palsy in the country. And I was connected with all the institutions from Chennai, Bangalore, Kolkata, where my own mother worked, Mumbai, and various other places. I reached out to all the centers to reach out to their alumni students who were teenagers, and through them to the entire community that I could. So pretty huge outreach I did. And then I met a bunch of them to see, because they're not trained actors, but the thing is they've never been given an opportunity to act. So I was prepared that they may not know that they have the ability to act. Now here, as a feature film director, I want to make a clear point, which is that acting is a talent. You either have it or you don't. I mean, this is my strong belief. And it's not a documentary film. It is a feature film. Now, the difference in a feature film is that you have an entire crew, you have a camera, it's very cold. So it's not like being on stage, and it's not like where it's documentary, where you can just be yourself and the camera is going to roll, or you're on stage and whatever happens, happens. Here, at a specific time, the camera is going to roll and you have a given set amount of time where you might have to cry or you have to emote in a different way. It's a very big talent. So you either have it or you don't, as I said, but it may not be known. So unfortunately, none of these people actually had the talent remotely. In fact, one person who was very keen to be in the film industry, she was very keen to be an actor, so I really auditioned her 3 times, but she was completely did not have any acting talent. However, another person who I felt she was very natural and I might be able to work with her. And so because I was so keen to cast a disabled person, a person with cerebral palsy actually, very specifically, not just a person in a wheelchair, but with CP, Jija Ghosh, I'd grown up with her in Kolkata actually. And so I was quite keen to cast her. And then we had a conversation about it after I did some test auditions, and I was ready to cast. And she said, but the thing is that I'm not going to be able to do the sex scenes, not physically, but I come from a middle-class family, and my family are just going to have a shit fit. I'm going to go home to that family and I'll not even be able to kiss the other person. And then she added on, she's an activist herself, that I insist that you therefore can't cast me, because that is the most important part of your film for me as a disabled person and as an activist, that you do show the full-fledged lovemaking scenes the way you visualize them and written them in your script. And so, Jija Ghosh wasn't cast either. And then I started a search to find the right actor. And there were 100 actors actually auditioned, and Kalki herself was very humble. She's a well-known actor and was very humble and prepped and did the audition. In seeing her audition, I could tell that she would be able to pull this off. In an audition like this, you can only see 10% of what the person will be able to deliver. And so I had a frank talk with her, and I said that, you need to give me a minimum of 3 months of your time, during which you won't be able to even do a commercial. Like actors often support themselves with commercials, and you can't do anything else. You have to just dedicate yourself to this. And she replied by saying, 3 months is not enough. I want 6 months. And this was a really courageous reply. And actually, to be honest, 3 other finalists, they all said, no, we can't. We cannot give you that time. It is the discipline and dedication and commitment along with the acting talent, which is what made Kalki right for the role. And kudos to her for pulling that off. And, she can talk more about her prep for it.
Thank you for giving us that background. And Kalki, I mean, it is an amazing performance. I hope people watching have already seen it, but if they haven't, if I didn't know your work, I would believe that you have CP in this role. And your acting talent comes through as well. So yeah, I'm curious, how did you feel taking on the role? Did you know it might be quite sensitive for you as an able-bodied person to be playing this role, and then how did you prepare? And I think you got to know Malini quite well.
Yeah, hi Wendy. I was terrified when I first got the script from Shonali. I was very nervous about the aspect of representing someone with a disability, and we, as she said, we chatted about it, and my issue was that I really need to have a lot of time for this. And also, even if after we decided that even if after we worked for like 6 months and workshop and everything, and then we film something and we're not happy with it and we don't feel convinced with it, we were ready to drop it. That was kind of a deal that we made, that, it has to work. And of course I had trust in Shonali because she's grown up with Malini. So I think the key to my performance was Malini, having access to Malini. I don't think I would have been able to pull this off without having Malini with me day in and day out. We were, spending a lot of time just hanging out. I think there's of course the physical disability that you're learning, to find out about, how the muscles are working, how the lungs are working, and so your stutter or your speech is broken into because you're trying to take another breath in between because your lungs are not strong enough to carry enough breath for an entire sentence. So things like this you learn technically, but the actual work is the practice, is the day in and day out of being in a wheelchair. And I remember one of those days when I was visiting Malini, we were both in wheelchairs, and at the end of the day I said, okay Malini, I'll see you tomorrow. And I got off the wheelchair, and that's when she said, see, that's the difference between you and me. You can always get up at the end of the day. And that really hit home, really hit hard. And that's kind of when I decided that during the entire shoot, I will stay in character. Even if I need to go to the toilet or, and as Shonali said, there isn't the kind of access that you have abroad here. Even though it required a little more time or a little more maneuvering around, I decided to stay in character because that's when I sort of felt also you would get the emotional frustration of being someone like Malini, who has lived in London and in India, so knows how to be completely, independent there, and how she's so dependent here, even if she goes to the cinema or something,
Yeah, because the film is partly set in New York, where there might be a different way of living compared to India. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in the film, I think you see it very subtly that in India, you hardly see her outdoors. And when she's in New York, she's almost always outdoors.
Right. And what about, you're using your body in a certain way to show the physical side of this disease, but you're also using your body in a sexual way. in this film, which is, as Shonali already said, is half the point of it, that disabled people can have sex lives. And it not even, outside of marriage, she's like playing the field a little bit. How, was that something you were worried about getting your head around, that you've got sort of a body being used in one way and sexually? How was that for you, Kalki?
Well, I think that Shonali created a very safe space for that scene. It was completely a closed set. My DOP was also a woman. I think the male actor probably felt more uncomfortable than I did. But it was a very, very safe set. At any point, she said, if you want to stop, we can. And I realized it was, just from my perspective, it was my first time doing a sex scene on film. And it's actually very technical. It's very much, okay, I want just this part in this frame. There was a moment where they stopped filming, they said cut, and they said they had a little discussion, she and the DOP, and I'm like, I'm sitting here naked, what's going on? Yeah? And then she comes back and says, so we think your nipples are a bit too pink. So we're going to just pink them a little bit. So I'm like,
the reason for that, the reason the nipple thing was important is because she's playing a brown woman, but Kalki is actually racially white. Yeah. And my DP, the DOP, DP, Director of Photography, Anne, she said that's a white woman's nipples. We need to make it like a brown woman's nipples. So then we had to go and put makeup on the nipple.
Yeah, so there's makeup happening. So it's very technical. And in terms of just preparing for that, there was very, I was very nervous because I spoke to a few people, disabled people who've had sex and who are married. But it's still not something you can really practice, so it was something I completely had to trust Shonali with. And yeah, I think, yeah, you can see the result.
It's tastefully done, but it's, romantic and should be. So Malini, I would love to ask you, why do you think it's important to show a disabled character having an active sex life? Why is that important for the world to see?
Very important. It's not at all shown in India.
Yeah. Look at
a disabled person's body is looked at with revulsion and pity.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we are not thought of as sexual beings. I felt that this was crucial for the world to understand. Sorry, Malini, say that again. I'm sorry, my sound was not good. Our desires are completely ignored and suppressed.
Yes.
We are not supposed to feel physical desire or love.
No,
No sex, please. You're disabled. Margarita with a straw completely smashed this myth. Thank you.
Done. Thank you. I agree. And Shonali, we spoke in advance, and there might be an interesting parallel you saw between the homosexuality and the disability, maybe especially how they're both seen in India in particular. Was that something, was it important that there was a homosexual angle? It wasn't just her having heterosexual encounters?
No, it's not that it was important. It could have just been heterosexual, but it just that, as I wrote the script, that my character, developed and became bisexual, and we had Khanum be this really outspoken gay character from Pakistan. The important parallel for me is that you have two marginalized groups. So the disabled are marginalized, but so are gay people marginalized, so are queer people marginalized. And there's a powerful conversation that the mother and daughter have at one point, which brings out the hypocrisy of one community versus another. So usually what happens, anybody who faces oppression, you're very loud, say, about Black people, but are you as loud about gay people? Like, you may be oppressed and only be able to speak up about your own specific self. So even when I introduced this gay character, Khanum, the love interest in the film, if you recall, she was introduced in the middle of a demonstration against the NYPD, against the New York Police Department for killing Black people. So even though she is visually impaired, she's part of a demonstration against the police department on Black people, not something to do with disability. A scene that we took out from the film was actually a scene between her and other disability activists, where they said, why should we go out if that's not our issue? Did Black people come and join us when we were fighting for sidewalks to be accessible? No, they didn't. And she answers by saying, well, if we all just stay in our own little boxes, then how are we ever going to end oppression? We need to all come out on everything and fight for everything. If you're fighting on social justice on one issue, why will you be silent on the other? And that parallel is important for me, and that whole issue. And Laila, the character, the protagonist, challenges her mother. You see, when her mother reacts with revulsion when she says that, she has a relationship with Khanum and she's bisexual. So the mother responds by saying, "Chi," like she's like, that's disgusting. And, and so Laila responds to and say, and the mother says, that's not normal. You are not normal. That's not normal. Being gay is not normal. And she responds by saying, when the world said to you that I am not normal, you stood up to the world and said, my daughter is normal. Your eyes are not normal in how you view my daughter. And today you're saying that I'm not normal because I'm gay, because it's something you do not understand. Your eyes are not normal, mother, in how you are viewing me as a gay person. I think that's a really powerful parallel that I wanted to bring out in the film.
Yeah, that's amazing. Shonali, you should be a public speaker, a sort of activist. Yeah. You've got a great voice. Yeah. And Kalki, can you talk a little bit about the response you've seen to the film from normal audiences?
Yeah, I've had really, really wonderful responses from just people in my building. There was a lady who came after our screening who said that she's been in touch with her own son who's gay. So, there's stories like this where I think the older generation that perhaps didn't talk about this very openly, is watching a film like this and wanting to talk about it. Generally, the film has been really well accepted in the country, I would say, and I've gone to a lot of universities. We've screened the film, and it's something where young people are very, very open to discussing the subject of disability and homosexuality. So, yeah, it's mostly been really wonderful.
Was there any backlash at any point of people saying this is too much or we don't want to see this on screen? Or
honestly, I don't know, because maybe I don't read enough of the the comment section on YouTube and things like that. But I do remember before making the film, having a lot of advice about not doing the film, like from colleagues in the industry, you know, managers, people who are, oh, you know, this is going to be good for your career and things like that. I've had that. But honestly, I kind of protect myself from a lot of the Twitter bashing. So I don't know if we had much backlash. Maybe
did you have a backlash?
No backlash. But I just want to add that to me, one of the biggest responses that I heard repeatedly were people saying that, wow, we always looked at a disabled person with pity, and it was difficult for us to go see the film thinking that we're going to just be sad. But Lila's character is just so vibrant, and Lila's just such a force. And that was important for me, that I created a great character. She's morally complex. Like, she's not usually a disabled person is put on a pedestal, like they're very pure and heroic. But, you know, Lila was you know, sort of mean to her own disabled friends like Dhruv. And that's important, that's important because she's just like a regular teenager. So what that did was then people were able to get past her disability and told me that, wow, we just saw her as a regular teenager. And the other big response that I loved was that about 8 people, and there may have been more, but 8 people specifically messaged me that they took their families to watch the film, and then they went home and came out to their families. So these were gay people, and that was so moving for me.
Oh, I'm gonna get.
This was a big theatrical release in India, and we did really well in theaters, which is not easy to do on a subject like this.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to go to a few audience questions, and one of them is just, where can we see the film? So if you were registered for Carla, I think you were emailed a link that you could watch it this weekend. It's on Netflix, but is that around the globe, Shonali, or is that in only?
I know it's in India for sure, and the US, I think it has it now on some other platform, not Netflix.
In the UK, it's Netflix. So if you're in the UK, but check to see if it's on Netflix in your country, or I think you can just Google it and find out.
Otherwise, it's on iTunes.
iTunes, yeah, buy it on iTunes. Definitely support this film. We got another really good question, I think. And it's from somebody who, working in the industry, who says, I spoke to a distributor once who told me that the audience does not want to see disabled people on screen. You know, did people tell you that at first? That's clearly not what's happened with the real audience.
No, that's huge. That was huge to not finding funding for the film, because in fact, we started out with the funding from Malini's activist organization called ADAPT, which is called Able Disabled All People Together. You know, 25 lakhs contribution from ADAPT, which is just an NGO which barely has any money, but because they so passionately believed in the importance of Margarita with a Straw, I could not have started, because to start off, you need just, you know, a little bit of money at least. And it's ADAPT who made that possible. And then a studio came on board, but, you know, they only gave half the money. And so my co-producer, co-director, Nilesh Maniyar, had to find it from his family. Like, it was extremely hard to get financing, because exactly that, they feel that audiences will not want to see disabled people on screen.
Yeah, and I think the session after this, we're going to be talking to the directors of Crip Camp, which is also on Netflix and has done very well. We don't know the numbers, but it's been talked about a lot. So hopefully the more examples we see, the more people will realize audiences are not, you know, as dumb as we make them out to be. They're happy to see films of all kinds of people. And it's also, I mean, I was impressed that this, as you sort of mentioned, this isn't just a disabled woman fighting the system and she's inspirational, and it's not that sort of cliche. This is just a real young woman who's got her own issues, her own problems. She's got strengths, she's got weaknesses. And yeah, I would like to ask Malini, somebody else has asked a question. What other kind of disabled people do we need to see on screen, whether in documentaries, in fiction films? What would you like for audiences to get to see more?
We need all kinds. We need to show people with all kinds of disability. The hearing impaired, the visually impaired. Autistic. Yes. the more people we show with disabilities and the more varieties of disabilities we show, I think we would educate. Thank you. Does that answer you, Wendy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Shonali, what do you think about that question? What would you like? Will you show more disabled characters in future films of yours?
See, for me, the key thing is that whenever you show somebody with a disability or somebody who's gay, that they should be there like they're a store clerk, for instance. So they're not there representing their condition. Do you know what I mean? That is important. Then say I may not make another film, like there's a limited number of films I'll make in my life. So I may not make another film with a disabled person as the protagonist, necessarily dealing with that condition or the complexity of that character. But say if I'm making a feature film, like just something, and I have to have a secondary character, and they are the secretary or they're something. So just the way we talk about like, okay, why does it have to be a white person all the time? You know, why does it have to be a white male? You can make that person a black woman. So similarly, we need to start thinking that you can make a person, you know, in a supermarket at the checkout counter, hearing impaired, or, you know, so you put them in the mainstream. So it's important that you put any marginalized beings on camera in the mainstream, like not just being black or gay or disabled, just being, you know, that character.
Yeah, that's really important. We've got another good question that's come in from the audience, which is, what was the reaction from the disabled or differently abled community to the film?
I'll answer that just before Malini, to say one thing, that my biggest fear was when I went to Berkeley. So Berkeley is, you know, the haven of disability activists, right? And I was really nervous of the Q&A there. And I think the big militant question that just came at me first was that, why didn't you cast? You know, and thank God for my own politics and my own family that I actually did make that attempt. But then I had to actually take another position and say that, yes, I did attempt. But if another filmmaker didn't attempt, and they actually cast an able-bodied person, I think we need to get past this political correctness business. I'll tell you this, that I even face flack because Kalki racially is white. Okay, so now, but Kalki is born and grown up in India. She is more Indian than I am, and Malini is. I've lived 30 years in America, that's why. So I've lived my entire adult life in America. Now, for Kalki to work in the film industry, because she's born and grown up in India, she speaks Tamil, she speaks Hindi, she's Indian actor. It's very difficult for her to get roles. Here, she was absolutely the only actor who could play this role. She was brilliant in it. So when I was racially asked this question, because, you know, America, it's really obsessed with this race question, and rightly so. I mean, it's an abhorrent country where racism is concerned. But in the situation of India, I would be discriminating against Kalki by not casting her. The most able-bodied, the most person with the highest ability to play this role, to actually take a very complex character to the world. The world cinema hasn't seen a character like Laila. Should I do disservice to my story and my character by discriminating against Kalki because she's not got brown skin? So I think this question of intersectionality and you know, it is a complex question. You know, it's not really simplistic. And it took courage, but I had the courage to say that, because I think people always turn around and say there's no such thing as reverse racism, because, you know, that doesn't happen. Just earlier in your conference, somebody was saying that. So I think these are important and complex questions. And for me, I actually did try to find somebody, but I was like, okay, even if you didn't, this is a fictional film, as I'm saying time and time and again. It's really, are you stereotyping in your character? Are you stereotyping when you're showing this condition? What are you doing with that? If you're showing a complex character and you get an actor to play it and not that person, because then you can break it down to everything. You know, tomorrow I'm doing a thing with a paranoid schizophrenic. Do I need to have a paranoid schizophrenic play that? Like, where do you draw the line when you're doing cinema? Right? In this question of representation. I'm actually doing a film with a trans person, and we had this conversation that, does it have to be a trans person playing that role? Or if I can't find the right actor who is trans, I'm going to have a person who's heterosexual playing that role, and I'm going to defend that. But this is a big debate in places like Berkeley. But the rest of the disabled community in the world, I must say, most people were thrilled because they never get to see a sexual being who's disabled. Actually, this is probably the first film, and that too a female person having a sexual life, certainly bisexual life that nobody has seen. It's not been seen in cinema, which is why Margarita was both at Toronto and at Sundance and was received hugely in film festivals.
No, I went to so many film festivals. And Malini, did you want to say something there?
All my friends love it.
All my friends loved it.
Okay, good. And Kalki, do you want to respond to that, this sort of question about who is allowed to play what role? And, you know, have you faced, reverse discrimination because of your skin color, for instance?
I grew up I was born in a village called Periyamudalya Chavadi. So whenever someone questions my identity and says, oh, you're not Indian or whatever, I just say I was born in Periyamudalya Chavadi. If you can say that, then you can contest my Indianness. But I definitely remember as a teenager being sort of seen as the loose-moraled white girl, because that's how women are represented on television. And, you know, we watch shows where, it's very different to see a woman on Baywatch from the woman you see on the street in India. So I had that. I remember being asked for drugs. If I was out with my friends, people would sell drugs to me. Even not even to like a boy, like, because the other thing is the female suppression, right? But even a boy would not be offered. It would always be me because I was a white girl. So there have been things like that, and I've had to explain, or I've had this constant thing of having to explain. Like in journalists will ask me, "Do you like India?" When I first began, and they didn't know my background. Do you like it here? Do you like spicy food? And all of those kind of questions. Now, thankfully, I don't have to deal with because they know my background. But yeah.
There's another good question that's come in from the audience. Let me just get it exactly. What were the sort of challenges that you were happy that you overcame in the making of this film? And I think that's for all of you. I'm sure there are many challenges to making any film, but especially this film, what was the challenge? Do you feel like you learned something special working on this film?
I think the biggest challenge for me, and the big fear, Kalki touched on it when she said the deal we made was, would we be able to be authentic? Because when I couldn't find somebody with a disability and an able-bodied person, and literally we had made that deal that we would do 6 months work and be ready to abandon. And I think our biggest fear was that can we do justice to the character, be authentic and really do that. And because money is something, it's not just this film. Any independent film is going to face that problem. So I think for me, that would have been the biggest hurdle, that I was worried that Malini and my family, are they going to love the film? And the very first screening I ever had in Malini's house, in their living room, for her and my mother and my aunt, who's like my mother, Mitu Alur, who's been like over 50 years serving the disabled. So I was terrified for her reaction. And she's also a big prude. So I was like really nervous. Yeah, she's very prudish. But she really loved the film. So I think for me, it was my big fear that because my family's also been in the disability movement, how are they going to judge me and respond to the work that I've done? Because they've done the work in real life and I'm doing it on cinema, so.
And yeah, Kalki, for you, I mean, I guess the biggest challenge for you was this 6 months of work and not knowing if it was going to work or not for you.
There was just so many worries and fears. One, definitely the work, and would it pay off? Would I manage to pull it off? The first time I've ever done a sex scene, how will that be taken, especially in a country like India where we don't often see our actresses naked? There was many things I was nervous about. Now I'm going blank. But also just Lila's happiness, Lila's personality, because, you know, there was all this intensity in the film. There's, you know, her mother dies, she's bisexual, she's disabled, and we're like, but will it come through that this is just a wonderful personality? And, you know, that's something I saw in Malini. When I first met Malini, she used to make jokes that just made me laugh so much. And you know, I wanted that side of it to come out. I wanted that Laila to come out. So yeah, I'm glad that there were people laughing in the audience. I'm glad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this film is joyful. You know, it's a drama, but it's also a joy to watch. And Malini, why are you, just to wrap up, proud of the film, and what do you hope people who watch it take away with them?
That people can do anything they want.
Yeah.
Great. I think that's our final word right there. I do encourage anybody who hasn't seen Margarita with a Straw, seek it out. It will open your mind. It will make you laugh, make you cry. It's been a real joy talking to all three of you. And thanks for joining us all the way from India, the magic of Zoom. Thank you so much. And yeah, good luck with the next films. Good luck with the activism. And thank you for sharing your stories of Margarita with a Straw. Thank you. So that was great talking about Margarita with a Straw. And now we are going to stick with disability on screen in quite a different way, but also in a way, another joyful film. And this is Crip Camp, which launched on Netflix right around the start of the lockdowns. So a lot of people have seen it. I think it's one of the films of the year. It is a documentary that started its journey at Sundance, where it won an award. It's about a camp for young people back in the 70s, 80s, that was for young people with disabilities, and it's sort of the first of its kind. And you'll see this is, again, quite a rock and roll story. And the ideas that started at this camp, Camp Jened, went on to, you know, inspire the Americans with Disabilities Act. So a really amazing film. And we are lucky to talk to the directors, the co-directors, Nicole Newnham and Jem Lebrecht. You'll also recognize Jem as one of the protagonists in the film, who was a camper at Jened, and he works in the film industry, obviously. Because they are based in California and it is the middle of the night there, we pre-recorded this chat, but I would like to show it to you now. And I think you'll also really want to listen to what Jem and Nicole have to say. So over to Jem and Nicole to talk about Crip Camp. Hello, thank you for joining Carla 2020. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm really proud to be one of the moderators and program advisors for this amazing conference. Thank you, WIFTY, for organizing it and getting so many amazing speakers here with us. Before I introduce today's panel about Crip Camp, just a reminder about what Carla is and is not. We have a sort of pledge that we're upholding, which is that I do not and will not condone any form of discrimination by myself or perpetuated by others on the basis of ethnicity, religion, geographical origin, skin color, religious beliefs, sexuality, gender identity, socioeconomic class, disability, or age. I declare that I do not and will not tolerate sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, ableism, fascism, or any other ism you want to try to throw at us. We're not having it at Carla. So just wanted to say that. And I know the guests we have today are very anti-ism folk as well. I'm really thrilled. We're going to be talking about Crip Camp, which is for me, quite simply, one of the films of 2020. I feel sure it's going to factor in the Oscar race. That's my own personal view. I hope everybody who's watching has seen it on Netflix already, or maybe seen it at Sundance, where it won the award. But if you haven't seen it already, then you can listen to this discussion and then go watch it later. It's just a remarkable piece of work. I'm so thrilled today we have here Jem Lebrecht and Nicole Newnham. They are the co-directors of Crip Camp. And of course, Jem, aka James, you're going to recognize as one of the protagonists of the film. So I'm thrilled to welcome them both, and thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts with Carla and our amazing global audience. So if I can start with Jim. Jim, you were a camper at Camp Jened. So where did the idea for the film come from? Had it been something sort of brewing in you for 30 years, or what happened?
Well, first off, thanks for having us here. I've been working in documentary film for a long time as a sound mixer, and also been somebody with a lifelong disability who, watching all the other documentaries I'm mixing, really seeing the power of documentary film. And I, over the last maybe 10, 15 years or so, really have started to really want to try to see films around disability that I wasn't seeing. And Nicole and I have known each other for ages. I've mixed 3 of her feature documentaries, and as she was wrapping up her last film, Revolutionary Optimist, she and I had lunch, and long story kind of short, near the end of that conversation where I had been trying to suggest different films she might be interested in doing around disability, I said, I'd love to see a documentary about my summer camp. I think there's a connection there between these group of people going from New York out to Berkeley, California, and the disability rights movement. So it's been brewing for a while.
Yeah. And did you want to direct it yourself, or did you pitch it to Nicole? How did it come to be that you two co-directed it? I said I was expecting just to produce. Yeah. And as Nicole and I started talking about this, and when she said yes, she also came back and said, I think we should direct this together. So we wound up producing and directing together. And it's the first time I've been directing a film, and so I've never quite found the right words to say how it felt that she said, let's do this together. But it was, it was lovely, and I appreciated it. I'm really glad we did. Great. And Nicole, when you heard about the story, this is not an ordinary summer camp. Why did you think it was going to be a story that a lot of people were going to be interested in, and that you wanted to be involved as a director?
Throughout my career, I've worked for in film and television to make money, and I've serially taken on passion projects of kind of independent social justice documentaries that I've felt passionate about. And over the years, I've really learned to wait until my heart starts pounding and I get incredibly excited and I can't stop thinking about something before I think about taking on a project. And when Jim told me about the camp, when he first said, I've always wanted to see a film made about my summer camp, I was curious, but I was also maybe rolling my eyes a little bit, because I think, a lot of people had this powerful transformational experience at their summer camp, but not every summer camp, deserves to be a 2-hour film. And also, I think, as a non-disabled person, part of the process for me of going through this project and working with Jim was kind of breaking down stereotypes, So I was totally unprepared for the description that Jim then gave of this camp, and even more unprepared for the photographs that he sent me later that night via Facebook that all the campers over the years had collated. And I just saw this explosion of, love and mayhem and joy and humor and community and diversity that was unlike anything I've ever seen. And thinking that could be, Jim had this theory that something about that profound experience of liberation at the camp sparked the movement that came later. And those are the kinds of things that I think are so exciting to be able to do in film, is sort of show the collisions of things, or the ways that history interrelates and sparks that are kind of dry to put in an article potentially, but could be really immersive for a viewer, that the camp could be a world that we could bring the viewer into, and in so doing, shift the way they saw disability and disability community, and then relate one of the great, civil rights stories of our time, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the States, and I'm really embarrassed that Judy Heumann wasn't somebody that I knew as a household name. And I don't think I'm the only one, so why is it, both of you can talk about why is it that so little of the world knew about this human rights movement for disability rights? Or am I naive? Do more people know about it than me? Why wasn't it more well known? Any ideas?
I mean, I think it goes back to the thing you said at the beginning. I think it's an ism. I think it's ableism, I think that's why. And in fact, there was a very, very powerful moment that we had when we premiered the film at Sundance, and all the people in the film were on stage, and we were getting wave after wave of standing ovation. It was really extraordinary. And even on the stage, Judy Heumann was getting these questions. Why don't I know about this? Why don't I know about you, And she said, look, this is an audience of, progressive media people. So, if you don't know about it, maybe you should ask yourself that question. Maybe you didn't want to see it. And I think that's true for me too. I vaguely knew about the story, but I knew nothing of how spectacular and how fundamental to our history it was.
And Jim, from your perspective, why aren't you a household name? Camp Jened should be known around the world. Why isn't Judy a household name? Maybe she is more now, but why haven't we heard this story a million times?
I think it's a combination of reasons. I think that just to get a film seen and made, you have to display a certain amount of potential interest in the story. And I think that that's not always the easiest thing to convince people to put their resources behind or be willing to air it. And we have not been, as people with disabilities, we've not been looked upon as a culture or a social movement. I mean, people do remember the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and such. And certainly there have been times that people with disabilities who've been demonstrating just even, 5 years ago or so with trying to save the Affordable Care Act here, better known as Obamacare, where disabled activists were going into the Capitol building and staging die-ins. But people just only look upon folks with disability as having something physically wrong with it versus this being a civil rights issue.
Yeah. And I think it was an article I read about Crip Camp that was noting that, or no, it might have been here in the UK, that at least 20% of the population could be considered disabled in some way. So this is not a very marginal, that's a huge part of the population that does, needs basic human rights. So, yeah. I mean, had you always planned, because I think this summer was 30 years of the ADA. Had you always hoped the film would be out for that anniversary, or was that sort of a happy coincidence?
It was a happy coincidence in that we realized it as we were fundraising for the documentary, and started planning for it. And so by the time we were lining up our partnership with Netflix, et cetera, we already had that sort of in our eyesight that we were going to try to do that, and we saw the potential of it, and we were excited about it because, in the same way that we hoped that people would come to Camp Jened and shift their perception and see disability history and culture in a different way, like it seemed like, as the sort of anniversary month played out last month, I think we both felt very encouraged that we felt like we started to see that the way the media was covering disability history and the ADA, for example, was much less about this legislative accomplishment that gave something to people with disabilities and was much more about this civil rights battle that had been fought by this community,
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I'm so grateful that I saw this film and saw behind the scenes of that movement, and saw how, you know, these people's activism started a lot when they were teenagers at camp. So yeah, I think it's a very powerful message even in 2020 to see what's happened. And Jen, do you feel like Crip Camp has become a sort of tool for disabled rights in this era? Do you hope that it inspires new activism?
We've seen a lot of people really embrace the film, and it's really seemed, you know, community growing up around it. And there's, we've been, part of our impact campaign has been what we've been calling our virtual Crip Camps every Sunday. And we have a few more of these left. But right just about from the beginning, there were people who, you know, what we've been doing is having speakers come in and talk and such. But a separate, completely autonomous Facebook group started. And they have, I don't know, a month or so ago, there were 600 people in there from throughout the world. And, you know, people just finding community and wanting to talk more. And and I kind of pop in there a fair amount just to kind of see what's going on. And it's just incredible, the kind of people saying, well, I feel like I finally have people I can talk with that kind of understand where I'm coming from. And so that's one big part of it. But Nicole came up with this term really early on that we're kind of this icebreaker, that we've had a wonderful relationship with Netflix in regards to trying to improve the accessibility of our film, that when we've gone places and such, we've just been able to really raise awareness within the organizations that are asking us to participate. And that's around accessibility, and just, you know, and kind of the message of the film about really looking at how people look at disability.
Yeah, and
both disabled and non-disabled.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I loved about the film is, Nicole's already sort of hinted at it, it's not just like, oh, look at this inspiring disabled person. There are a lot of funny moments, there's sex, there's drugs. It's kind of a punk rock film in some ways. And, you know, I feel like a lot of times it feels quite prescriptive how we see disabled people on our screens. And it has to be somebody inspiring and, yeah, overcoming a barrier, and they're not always a 360-degree character. So I'm curious to hear what your hopes would be for seeing more kinds of disabled lives on screen, whether that's in the documentary world, whether that's in the fiction world. Does it feel like we're going into a period where we can hopefully see more rich lives presented on screen? And how do we support that?
We spent a couple of hours talking about this one issue alone. I've certainly been heartened by some films, or I've been watching a lot of Netflix myself at home, and where I'm seeing characters with disabilities that are just kind of part of the fabric of the project, and it's not like, oh my gosh, we have this film about the heroic person with a disability. It really comes down to what we experienced with Crip Camp, which is that that we want an authentic story, and that can be best told by the people who've lived that experience. And until we have actors with disabilities who have achieved stardom, until people like myself are, or with any type of disability, are in the writers' rooms, who are producers, things are not going to change that quickly. But the stigma involved with disability is filtering out so many people from my community to building careers. And when you look at how people traditionally build a career, and this is how people become the leaders and the tastemakers, or the people that are really kind of steering the stories that we see, having a disability there's tough barriers that we have, and it's not because we can't do the job. It's that, gosh, you have to be this, intern who can run around and get coffee and go make photocopies and do 20-hour days, and that filters out a lot of people, not just with disabilities. So we have to look at the system that allows people to rise and realize that there's ableism and barriers throughout it. And it's the responsibility of the people in the industry to take a long, hard work at it and fix it.
And so what do you think is some steps to fixing it? Is it just making sure that, the lists of actors and directors you're considering might include people of all races and all kinds of levels of ability? And, is that a start? Is it hiring more disabled people in positions of power with commissioning budgets? Or how can we start to make this better? Nicole, also, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those things you mentioned are really important. There's many things that need to happen, but it's kind of, I sort of feel like you see in Crip Camp, after the ADA is passed, Denise Jacobson, one of our characters who has cerebral palsy, says, you can pass a law, but until you change society's attitudes, it's not going to mean much. I think it's that same kind of cultural shift. And it's also, I think it's getting our society culturally to understand that ableism is a thing, and that it's, that it's really destructive for not just people with disabilities, but for all of us. And kind of, making it not okay to discriminate. It has to be not okay to have a set that's inaccessible. I mean, right now, if you wanted to cast a film that had multiple people in wheelchairs, you wouldn't be able to find the trailers that were accessible to accommodate that. We had to rip out seats in a theater to have our entourage at opening night at Sundance. It's that, and it's not just physical accessibility, of course. It's like you said, it's like getting those people in the room, establishing the pipelines, establishing the internships. And so much of that, I think, is kind of cultural awareness. And so, that's the kind of advocacy work that this growing number of people like Jim and others in the industry, are doing, I think is so critical and necessary.
And Jim, any other thoughts about, specific actions that can be made?
I think there's some things like, well-known performers should have inclusion writers that include people with disabilities. And that people who are casting and directors and producers have to look at people with disabilities being able to play a role that isn't necessarily written specifically for someone with a disability. And, I'm starting to see that. I've been watching this show called The Politician, and there are some really wonderful casting of people with disabilities in that series. And this is where I want to be.
I haven't watched that yet. It's on my Netflix queue.
I'm not being paid by Netflix to promote all of their films. I promise you, it's just that literally 2 or 3 years ago, something like this I would never see.
Yeah. Here at this Carla conference, we've talked about the female gaze, the queer gaze. Is there such a thing as the disabled gaze? Is that an offensive term? I mean, or is it, just making sure that people with disability are involved in the making of these projects?
I think that when you have people with disabilities or any group that's been marginalized as part of what you're doing, there's just a natural way that you're not going to fall into the old tropes. And I think that you could, look at how you're approaching almost any production nowadays, and put disability in that term, or deafness in that term, and you can check yourself and say, are we doing it the same for this community as we are now finally trying to do for other communities? And I don't think you're going to see a lot of yeses.
I mean, we thought about that a lot in the crafting of Crip Camp. We thought about really intentionally making it a film that felt to the viewer like a film that was a community telling its story to itself. So it was an insider story, you know, and that was partially to elevate the idea of disability culture, which the film was celebrating. But it was also to make the non-disabled audience aware of this idea of gaze, you know, so that throughout the film there are these moments where we really tried to challenge the viewer and make them understand that about the way they typically have seen things, and make them feel the joy of a world where that kind of stereotyping breaks down. So yeah, I think you know, I've been reading about other films that are starting to be produced, you know, about like the Deaf President Now movement at Gallaudet and things like that. And it's going to be really exciting for people to be exposed to so many other stories that have the potential, you know, to do that. Because there are so many other, I mean, there's so many other versions of the story of the 504 sit-in and, you know, the disability rights movement in the 70s that we told. There's just a kind of never-ending richness there to be explored.
Yeah, I'm ready for more. We should mention you have some important collaborators on this film, not just all the people we see on screen who are really important, but in addition to my brilliant producer friend Howard Gertler, who we love, you have the Obamas on board, I think as executive producers, if I'm not mistaken. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got them involved and how supportive they've been? I mean, you can slag them off and say they've not been supportive. I don't think that's really true. You can be honest. But yeah, how did you get them on board and how did that change the film? Did that change the life of the film, the exposure?
It was our brilliant producer friend, Howard Gertler, actually, who had the brainstorm when he read in the trades that the Obamas were entering into a deal with Netflix and were going to start a production company. He immediately thought how exciting it would be to put this story in front of them. And we were still fundraising and kind of at the point of, you know, we had a fundraising trailer and we were inching towards an assembly in the film. And so he was able to navigate to get that trailer in front of Priya Swaminathan, who had just been hired to run Higher Ground, and she fell in love with the trailer and showed it to the president and Mrs. Obama and called us. And, you know, we were really, so obviously we were overwhelmed and deeply excited at what this kind of platform could do for our hopes for the impact this story could make in the world. And we were excited and overwhelmed by the idea of collaborating with them, but we were mostly excited because we felt like we found exactly the right home and that they really deeply understood that this was a culture shifting project, and they understood that it was a major historical documentary that was, you know, going to be presenting this untold, really important history. So they really, they gave us time and space. They believed in the way we wanted to tell the story, which was fairly unorthodox. And they watched, you know, several cuts of the film and gave feedback, which was extraordinary along the way. And you know, I mean, for one thing, you know, you're getting a perspective that nobody else in the world has when you're getting notes from people like that. But also, you know, just by any measure, they were supportive, really incredible collaborators.
Great. Jem, are you hanging out with Michelle on Zoom all the time now, or? It's my
no,
dream.
I don't do much. I don't do the kind of exercises she does. So okay. We're not exercise buddies. No, it's been extraordinary, you know, being associated with them and really, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any wonderful jokes. What's that, Nicole?
Oh, I was just going to say that if you look on President Obama's Instagram, you'll see this few weeks ago, he dropped into a Zoom call actually of our virtual Crip Camp and had a really amazing conversation with like young activists in the disability justice movement who were talking about you know, sort of political activism. So, and the next generation of political activism in the community. So it was fun and amazing.
Cool. I want to start wrapping up, I guess, sadly, but just to hear what you think this film has meant to audiences, because everybody I've told to watch it has loved it. You know, my parents who don't even watch a lot of documentary, you know, they thought it was amazing. How has that felt? I guess starting with Sundance and then on Netflix, and especially while the world has kind of been locked down and on their sofas, does it feel like you've really connected with audiences, and any reasons why you think that has happened?
Well, I think
film so good, Jan. Yeah.
I mean, look, I think that what you're hearing, like we've mentioned, is that people didn't know this story. And so it is, for so many people, it's new, and what was accomplished, what we see that was accomplished and how it was accomplished, the extraordinary ends that people went to. I mean, that is an incredibly compelling story. And it's compelling not because, oh my God, look what a bunch of people in wheelchairs or blind or deaf did. It's compelling because a group of people got together and started something. And in the long run, through a lot of guts and grit, we're able to affect change. It's a damn good story.
It's a great story, yeah.
We see the film being shown in activist spaces, which is really exciting. Like we've seen it, you know, being like things online where it's being shown, you know, by the resistance movement in Portland, or it's being shown in Athens and, you know, informal settlements. And people just really like starting their own Crip camps and their own virtual communities, completely independent of Crip camp. Last week, Jim and I were on this call with students from Sandy Hook and students from Parkland who've formed a virtual community that's disabled and non-disabled students getting together. That was completely inspired by watching our film, you know? So that, I mean, that level of connecting with audiences is so profound and beautiful. And I think it actually surpasses our hopes and expectations in some way.
That is amazing. I didn't know that story. So if people do want to, I guess, get more involved, is there a Crip Camp website where you're getting people together, or it's kind of informal on Facebook, or where can people find out more?
Well, we do have a website, www.cripcamp.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of great information there. And also, just let me point out also on the Netflix website, if you go and click on the details for our film, you can download or view a script of the film that was developed specifically for people who are deaf-blind, so that they can experience the film also.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that was there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the film is in more languages being captioned or audio described than Netflix has ever done before.
Great. And Nicole, any suggestions from you? Just, you know, go onto the website if people want to connect more, learn more.
Yeah, and I think if people want to learn more about this in general, they really should get on disability Twitter, which is, you know, changed my life, honestly. And I would start by following some people like Alice Wong, Maysoon Zaid. If you're in the States, Rebecca Coakley is incredible. You know, there's and then you'd find your way to other people. But there's incredible storytelling and activism and culture that is existing on Twitter, and you can just learn a phenomenal amount by doing that.
Great. I also wanted to mention, I'm not involved with it, but in the UK, the BFI has recently announced its a campaign called Press Reset that they developed with a disability advisory board here in the UK. And it's sort of active steps or new ways of thinking for the film industry in particular. And I think a lot of people don't know where to start. So I would recommend, I don't know if it's perfect. You know, I haven't even read all of it myself, but I just looked at the points, and I think if there are people in the film industry watching who want to know some positive steps to make, I would recommend that. So you can find that at bfi.org.uk, and then I think find it from there, but it's called Press Reset. So just a little plug for some people trying to do some proactive work. And as Jim and Nicole said, yeah, check out some of the resources at Crip Camp, and you know, everything at cripcamp.com.
Also, a group of us got together and started a Filmmakers with Disabilities working in the documentary space. And we have a rather good website now. It's fwd-doc.org, which stands for Forward Doc, Filmmakers with Disabilities working in documentary. There's a lot of great information there also. And another way to kind of connect with filmmakers with disabilities and our allies.
Great. Yes, let's all be allies. And thank you so much, Jim and Nicole, for making this film, which is really entertained and inspired, and just, you know, it's just a wonderful film. And I really recommend that people who are watching this chat that haven't seen it, please go check it out on Netflix. But really, thank you for making the film, and thank you for talking about some of these important subjects. I think it's so important for what we're doing at Carla this weekend. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And everybody stay connected, stay allied, and watch Crip Camp. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's really weird to be handed over to from myself. But thank you for joining that first block of Carla. I wanted to thank Jim and Nicole for that eye-opening session, and to all the speakers who took part in that first block, which was It's Not You, It's the System. So I hope you enjoyed that. The next block, the second block, which is If You Don't Interrupt It, You Allow It, will be hosted by Melissa Silverstein. That will start at 1 p.m. Swedish time. So figure that out in your time zone. But now, never a dull moment at Carla. You can now join us for lunch and networking. You kind of have to bring your own lunch on Zoom, I'm afraid. But other people will be mingling. You can find the link in the YouTube chat. If you go to the program page on the Carla website, there will be a join button. So please go join the lunch and networking session. And yeah, in about 40 minutes, we'll be back with Melissa and the second block. And thank you so much for joining us for this first block. Enjoy your lunch. And thanks again to all the amazing speakers.